What happens when a live morning show suddenly turns into a moment nobody expected, right in front of the cameras? Make sure to subscribe to the Echo Scoop and like and comment for more talk show coverage. The studio of The View was already buzzing that morning, but the energy shifted the second the audience realized the producers had finally managed to book someone they'd been trying to bring on for years. As soon as the doors opened and the announcer called his name, the entire room erupted for Tom Cruise, who walked out smiling, waving, trying to keep the atmosphere light. But even he seemed a little caught off guard by how loud the applause got. He gave a small nod, that polite half-grin he does, and took his seat across from the panel. A quick glance to his left showed Whoopi Goldberg watching him with her reading glasses low on her nose, her expression unreadable, which instantly set the tone. The first few seconds felt normal, the casual pleasantries, the, "How are you?" and, "So happy to have you here." But there was this strange tension in the way Tom sat forward, elbows on his knees, and the way Whoopi kept looking at the note cards instead of him. The audience picked up on it too. You could hear those little whispers ripple through the studio, the kind where people are trying not to be loud but can't help reacting. One of the co-hosts started with a softer question about Tom's new project, something about how physically demanding it was and whether he still did his own stunts. Tom smiled, the relaxed, practiced version, and said something about discipline, training, and pushing boundaries. The usual talk show stuff. But Whoopi barely waited for him to finish before she cut in, and the tone shifted instantly. She leaned back, arms crossed, and said, "Okay, but let's talk about something else that keeps coming up around you," in this slow, paced-out tone that made the whole audience sit up a little straighter. Tom blinked, his smile falling just slightly, and he said, "Sure, what would you like to talk about?" His voice was steady, but you could hear a faint edge, like he already knew where this might be heading but was hoping he was wrong. Whoopi tapped the cards together once and said, "There've been conversations, long-running ones, about how you handle certain things in Hollywood." She didn't elaborate right away, which made the room feel heavy. Tom's eyes narrowed, not aggressively, but curiously, and he slid forward even more, like he wanted the question straight, no build-up. "Are we talking professional or personal?" he asked. A couple of the co-hosts exchanged a quick glance, the kind that lasts less than a second but says everything, "Oh, here we go." The audience murmured again, louder this time, and someone in the back laughed nervously. Live TV always has that unpredictable edge, but this moment felt particularly unstable. Whoopi finally clarified, "Professional. There's this perception that working with you isn't always easy. That you take things too far, push people too hard, and sometimes cross lines." She didn't raise her voice, but she didn't soften it either. It was the kind of statement hosts usually hint at, not say directly. Tom's jaw tightened. "I take my job seriously," he said. "I take the work seriously. I've never asked anyone to do something I wouldn't do myself." One of the other hosts tried to jump in, probably hoping to keep things from escalating too early in the segment, saying something like, "Well, we've all heard different versions over the years, but we also know your work ethic is legendary." Whoopi didn't let her finish. She held up a hand slightly, keeping her eyes locked on Tom. "But legendary doesn't always mean healthy," she said. "Some people say it's too much." Tom exhaled, slow, deliberate. He didn't look angry yet, but you could feel him shifting from polite guest to someone ready to defend himself. "People say a lot of things," he replied, usually without understanding the full picture. The audience reacted. Some clapped, some gave that "oh" sound people make when they sense a line being drawn. The energy was pulsing now, and the cameras zoomed in a little more as if the operators could sense the moment tightening. Another co-host tried to soften the exchange by asking a question about the filming process, hoping to steer the conversation back towards safe territory, but Whoopi shook her head slightly, not in refusal but in insistence. She wasn't done. "Let me be clear, Tom. I'm not saying you don't work hard or that your results aren't impressive. I'm saying we've all heard stories about how intense things get around you." Tom finally turned his body toward her fully, his voice lower now. "If you're going to bring up stories, let's talk about facts," he said. "I don't have an issue discussing anything real." The temperature of the studio rose another degree. You could almost hear people holding their breath. One of the hosts reached for her mug, sipping slowly, clearly trying not to interfere. Another nervously adjusted her note cards. Whoopi tilted her head, a small smile tugging at one corner of her mouth. Okay, she said. Fact, you've had multiple people say you create an atmosphere that's difficult. Tom didn't break eye contact. And I've had thousands who say the opposite. The tension between them sparked into something sharper, not yelling, not anger, but that electric clash of two people who both believe they're standing on solid ground. Tom's voice stayed measured, but the intensity was unmistakable. Look, I'm here to promote a film. I don't mind talking about the hard parts of my career. But if we're going to have that conversation, let's make sure it's fair. Whoopi blinked once, slow. Fair for who? She asked. That question hit harder than anything said so far. The audience reacted instantly, gasps, murmurs, a few scattered laughs from people who weren't sure whether to be nervous or entertained. The co-hosts sat frozen for a second, watching the exchange unfold like everyone else. Tom leaned back slightly now, but his eyes stayed focused. Fair for everyone involved, he said. For the people who work with me and for the people watching this conversation. Not just the narratives that get thrown around. Whoopi tapped her cards again, glancing briefly at the producer offstage before returning her gaze to Tom. Then maybe you should explain why those narratives exist. Tom breathed out slowly, visibly trying not to take the bait. Narratives exist because they're easy, he said. Because people love a story more than the truth. Someone in the audience applauded at that line, and a few others followed, not because they were choosing sides but because the energy had built to a point where reacting felt inevitable. The co-host on the far right finally spoke up, laughing awkwardly. Okay, wow, this is getting passionate, she said. Let's make sure we're not turning breakfast television into a boxing match. That earned a small wave of laughter from the crowd, and even Tom cracked the faintest smile, but Whoopi stayed serious. Passionate is fine, she said. But so is accountability. Tom's expression changed again, this time softer but firmer. Accountability goes both ways, he said. I'm always open to having real conversations. But not ones based on rumors. The air tightened again. The tension wasn't exploding, it was simmering, building, turning into the kind of TV moment people don't look away from. And this was only the beginning. The moment the show returned from its brief commercial break, the energy in the studio felt completely different. The audience wasn't just watching anymore. They were leaning in, caught somewhere between curiosity and disbelief, waiting to see what would happen next. The panel's smiles looked tighter now, more like the kind people wear when they're trying to hold things together on live television. Tom adjusted his jacket slightly as the cameras came back on him, but he didn't shy away from anything. If anything, he looked even more ready to face whatever was coming next. Whoopi, meanwhile, sat with her hands folded, her expression calm but unwavering. She didn't avoid looking at him, and she didn't look at the cards this time. It was clear she intended to continue the conversation exactly where it left off. So, she began, her tone steady but no longer softening anything. Before the break, you said people choose stories because they're easy. What I'm asking is, what part of those stories do you think isn't true? Tom didn't hesitate. The idea that I treat people badly, he said plainly. The idea that I create chaos on set. That's simply not who I am, and it's not how I work. Anyone who actually works with me knows that. One of the co-hosts jumped in with a calmer tone, clearly hoping to soften the moment. But Tom, you do have a reputation for being intense. Dedicated, yes, but intense. Tom nodded. Dedicated is exactly the word, he replied. When people are risking their lives, when stunts are dangerous, when deadlines are tight, we all have to be focused. That's not chaos, that's professionalism. Whoopi raised her eyebrows slightly. But there are videos, interviews, reports. Are all of those wrong? The audience murmured. The tension climbed again, slowly but steadily, like a wave pulling back before it hits the shore. Tom took a breath. Some things get taken out of context. Some things get exaggerated. And some things get twisted into something they never were. That's the truth. He wasn't defensive now. He was firm, controlled, measured. The kind of tone that said he wasn't running away from the conversation. Another co-host stepped in, trying to add balance. Is it fair to say your passion can sometimes be misunderstood? Tom nodded again. Yes. Absolutely. Passion can be misunderstood. When you care deeply about something, not everyone sees it the same way. Whoopi leaned forward slightly, elbows on the table, her voice lowering just a touch. Tom, nobody doubts your passion. But when people speak up, crew members, coworkers, when they say they felt uncomfortable or pressured, doesn't that matter? The audience reacted again, soft gasps, a few nods, even a couple of quiet claps. Tom's expression softened for the first time. It does matter, he said. It always matters. If anyone ever feels that way, I want to understand why. I want to fix it. But what I won't do is accept blame for things that aren't accurate. There was a brief pause, and one of the co-hosts quickly tried to slide in a neutral question about how Tom handles stress on set, clearly attempting to redirect the conversation before it intensified again. Tom answered politely at first, talking about focus, routine, the intensity of the work, but as he spoke, Whoopi's expression didn't change. She was listening, but she wasn't done. And Tom could sense it. When the co-host finished her question, Whoopi lifted her card again, just slightly, and said, "Can I ask something directly?" Tom gave a small nod, even though he looked a bit wary now. "Go ahead." "Do you think," she said carefully but firmly, "that you sometimes forget other people aren't built like you? That not everyone can match your level of energy or pressure?" A hush fell over the studio. Even the camera operators seemed to freeze. Tom sat back a little, thinking. His eyes dropped for just a moment before he looked back at her. "I push myself harder than anyone else," he said. "That's true. And maybe I do expect a lot from people. But I also respect the people I work with. Deeply." Whoopi nodded as he spoke, but she didn't break eye contact. Respect is important. But pressure affects people differently. A co-host quickly stepped in, placing a hand on the table like she was physically trying to ground the moment. "Let's acknowledge something," she said, smiling at the audience. "Tom is one of the biggest stars in the world. Expectations follow him everywhere. I think it's fair to say that comes with a lot of weight." The audience applauded, grateful for a moment of relief. But Tom looked back at Whoopi. "Look, I'm here to have a real conversation. I don't shy away from accountability. But I want to be represented fairly. That's all." Whoopi finally leaned back, almost relaxing for the first time since the segment started. "Fair enough," she said. And the audience reacted immediately, clapping, cheering, not because the tension was gone, but because the exchange felt real, raw, unscripted, the exact thing people watch live TV hoping to see. But the energy wasn't resolved. Not even close. The intensity hadn't disappeared, it had simply shifted, simmering beneath the surface, waiting for the next spark. The producers must have sensed the atmosphere tightening again, because when the show returned from another quick break, the cameras didn't even bother with the usual wide shot. They went straight to the table, straight to Tom and Whoopi, almost as if they already knew the moment was going to pick right back up where it left off. And it did instantly. One of the co-hosts tried to start with a light comment, something about how lively the morning had become, but her voice faded the moment she realized neither Tom nor Whoopi was easing into small talk. They were both sitting with that same unspoken tension in their posture. The audience sensed it too. There was no laughter now, no scattered whispers. Everyone was watching intently, waiting to see who spoke first. Whoopi finally broke the silence. "Before we move on," she said in a tone that felt calm but loaded, "I want to ask you something honestly. You said you don't run from difficult conversations. So I'm asking, when you hear that people feel intimidated by you on set, even if you didn't intend it, does that impact you at all?" Tom took a breath, steady but slightly heavier than before. "Of course it does," he said. "I don't want anyone to feel intimidated by me. That's not what I aim for. But I also know that when you're one of the leads, when the responsibility falls on you, sometimes people read intensity as intimidation." Whoopi nodded slowly as if weighing his words. "But can you understand why some people might see it differently?" "That's fair," Tom replied. "And I'm not dismissing anyone's experience. But I'm also not going to sit here and pretend that passion equals mistreatment. They're not the same thing. The audience murmured again, and one person clapped before quickly stopping, realizing no one else joined in. The whole room felt cautious, like everyone was afraid their reaction might push the moment too far. Another co-host leaned in, her voice softening dramatically. Tom, I think everyone here respects your commitment. No one's saying you don't care. But I think what Whoopi's trying to highlight is that sometimes leadership styles can impact people differently. Tom nodded politely but looked back to Whoopi. I'm listening, he said. I'm taking in what you're saying. But I'm asking for something in return, fairness. Because the industry loves drama. It loves taking one intense moment and turning it into who you are. Whoopi held his gaze, then exhaled slowly. That might be true, she said, but when multiple people say similar things, it can't just be dismissed as drama. Tom's jaw flexed slightly. Not anger, just tension. No one's dismissing anything, he answered. What I'm saying is that if there's an issue, I handle it. Directly. With the people involved. Not with rumors. Not with headlines. And not with interpretations made by people who weren't there. That sparked a louder reaction. Some claps. Some surprised gasps. A few scattered cheers. The energy in the room was morphing again. No longer just tense but charged. One co-host tried to diffuse it. Okay, let's take a breath for a second, she said with a laugh that didn't fully reach her eyes. It's live TV, folks. Nothing wrong with a little intensity, but let's keep it conversational. Tom offered a polite smile but didn't turn away from Whoopi. Their eye contact was locked, like neither of them was willing to break before the other did. Whoopi straightened her glasses, her expression calm but firm. Tom, she said quietly, I'm not trying to attack you. I'm asking questions people have been wanting to hear answers to. And I'm answering them, Tom replied, matching her tone. Directly. Honestly. Then let me ask you this, she continued. Do you think you've changed over the years? Tom blinked, surprised by the angle. Changed how? As a person, Whoopi clarified. As someone in this industry for decades. Do you think you're different now than you used to be? The audience leaned in like the question was physical. Even the co-hosts paused mid-movement. Tom thought for a moment before answering. Yes, he said finally, voice quieter. I think everyone changes. With experience, with mistakes, with growth. I've learned a lot. About myself. About people. About the weight of my position. And I think I'm better because of it. For a moment, the entire studio softened. Even Whoopi's expression shifted, just slightly, as if she appreciated the honesty. But before anyone could relax into that moment, another co-host tried to jump in with a question about aging in Hollywood, a harmless topic meant to steer the conversation to safer waters. But Whoopi raised a hand gently, signaling she wasn't done. Let me ask one last thing before we move on, she said, turning back to Tom. When you see all these conversations happening, online, in interviews, in articles, do you feel misunderstood? Tom let out a slow breath. Often, he said simply. Very often. Because people forget that I'm human. They forget that I'm not just a headline or a character in their story. I'm someone who works hard, who cares deeply, who puts everything into what I do. And sometimes that gets lost. Whoopi stared at him for a moment, her expression unreadable. Then, unexpectedly, she nodded. Fair enough, she said quietly. The audience reacted with applause, not the explosive kind, but the appreciative kind, like something real had just been acknowledged. But just as the energy seemed to soften, another co-host added, well, we haven't talked about the recent behind-the-scenes clip that leaked. And the second she said it, the audience gasped, Whoopi's eyebrows rose, and Tom's expression changed. Not anger, just a sudden alertness, a shift in posture, like he had just heard the one thing he was hoping wouldn't be brought up. The tension snapped back into place instantly. And that's where the moment turned. Because that clip was about to change everything. As soon as the co-host mentioned the leaked behind-the-scenes clip, the studio felt it collectively. The air shifted again. Tom's posture went rigid for just a second, and Whoopi's eyes widened slightly, though she didn't look away. The audience was on the edge of their seats, leaning forward, sensing that the conversation was about to hit a new peak. Cameras zoomed in, capturing every subtle reaction, every twitch and glance. "Let's just clarify," Tom said carefully, "because I know the internet has already jumped on this, and the stories are exaggerated." His voice remained calm but carried an unmistakable firmness. "Yes, a clip exists. It's a moment in time. But taken alone, it doesn't tell the full story. Context matters. Always context." Whoopi tilted her head, studying him. "Tom, people see these clips and make judgments. That's what we're discussing. We're not here to demonize you, but to understand." Tom nodded. "I get that. I really do. But I also want the truth to be clear. One moment doesn't define a career. One scene doesn't define a person." The audience murmured. Some nodded, some whispered among themselves. You could feel that subtle tension that comes from a room waiting for someone to break the calm. And then, just as quickly, one co-host chimed in, trying to smooth things over. "Well, Tom, we all know the work you put in. Fans, co-stars, they all notice it. But the question is, how do you manage the pressure and maintain respect at the same time?" Tom took a breath, letting the question hang for a moment, then spoke deliberately. "It's about communication, respect, and awareness. I try to balance high standards with understanding the people around me. But yes, sometimes it's a lot to manage, and I've had to learn the hard way." Whoopi leaned back, arms crossed, her gaze still sharp. "And the criticism? How do you deal with that?" Tom's response was immediate. "You listen, you reflect, and you adjust if it's fair. But you also ignore the noise that's not constructive. There's a difference between criticism that helps you grow and gossip that just spreads negativity." A quiet cheer broke out in the audience, as if people were relieved to hear a genuine acknowledgement. Some clapped quietly, others nodded in agreement. The energy shifted slightly. The tension wasn't gone, but it was tempered now by sincerity. Whoopi finally cracked the faintest smile. "I think that's a start. But let's be honest, live TV doesn't give you much time to explain every nuance, does it?" "No," Tom said with a small laugh, the first time anyone saw him chuckle that segment. "It doesn't. But at least we can start the conversation honestly." The audience applauded again, louder this time. Cameras panned across the crowd. People were leaning forward, some clapping, some shaking their heads in disbelief at how candid the exchange had become. The co-hosts exchanged subtle glances, silently acknowledging that this had become one of the most intense yet grounded segments in recent memory. As the show wrapped up, Tom stood, thanked the hosts for having him, and waved to the audience. Whoopi gave a polite nod, still maintaining a professional distance, but there was a hint of mutual respect in her expression. The applause grew louder as the credits rolled, capturing the mix of relief, excitement, and awe that only live television can generate. Outside the studio, the clip of the confrontation began circulating almost immediately. Social media exploded: Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Hashtags like #TomCruiseTheView, #OnAirTension, and #Whoopi vs. Tom trended within minutes. Fans debated passionately, some defended Tom, praising his honesty and composure, others sided with Whoopi, applauding her for pressing difficult questions. The discussions weren't tame, they were fiery, authentic, and exactly what people live TV thrives on. Even entertainment news outlets picked up the story, replaying key moments and analyzing body language, tone, and unspoken cues. Every outlet emphasized that this was not a staged argument. It was raw, real, and happening live. And that authenticity made it more compelling. People watched it over and over, dissecting every word, every pause, every glance. By the evening, the segment had become a case study in live television dynamics: how tension builds, how public figures manage pressure, and how real conversation can still captivate an audience without turning into outright chaos. Analysts noted that both Tom and Whoopi handled themselves professionally, despite the sparks, and that the show benefited from the honesty rather than suffering from it. For viewers at home, it was more than just celebrity drama. It was a reminder of what happens when people are put in the same room with honesty, accountability, and a little unavoidable tension. It was unpredictable, it was compelling, and it sparked conversations far beyond the studio walls. As the show concluded, the co-hosts thanked Tom one last time, and Whoopi offered a small nod of acknowledgement. The audience gave a final round of applause, cameras cut to the host's desk for closing remarks, and the studio lights dimmed slightly, signaling the end of an unforgettable live broadcast. So what do you think about this intense on-air exchange? Did Tom handle the pressure well, or do you think Whoopi pushed the conversation too far? Share your opinion in the comments and subscribe to the Echo Scoop for more real talk show stories.